Hi students, it's Miss Wasick. I'm going to be reading chapter 12 and 13, and I just want to do a quick reminder of where we left off because I know I went all week without posting a video. So for a quick refresher, chapter 11 was about how Lena discovered that Lizzie Bisco, her best friend, was taking stuff from the supply rooms that Looper was giving her, such as creamed corn and peaches, and Lena felt like that was really wrong because they were keeping that stuff to themselves instead of letting other people know about it. So I'm going to go ahead and begin reading chapter 12, which is called A Dreadful Discovery, and you're going to be really excited about this chapter. So our thinking stem as I read is going to be, when the book said, I was thinking, I agree or disagree with Dune, I think it was right or wrong too. Okay, and I will model an example of that, and I might stop once for you to fill in that thinking stem with what you believe Dune is doing. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Chapter 12, A Dreadful Discovery. About a week after he and Lena had seen the man come out the mysterious door, Dune was assigned to fix a clog in Tunnel 207. It turned out to be easy. He undid the pipe, rammed a long, thin brush down it, and a jet of water spurted into his face. Once he'd put the pipe back together, he had nothing else to do, so he decided to go out to Tunnel 351 and take another look at the locked door. It was strange, he thought, that no announcement about a way out of Ember had come. Maybe that door had not been what they thought it was. So he was set out for the south end of the pipeworks. When he came to the roped-off passage in Tunnel 351, he ducked in and walked along the dark, feeling his way. He was pretty sure the door would be locked as usual. His mind was on other things. He was thinking of his green worm, which had been behaving oddly, refusing to eat and hanging from the side of its box with its chin tucked in. And he was thinking about Lena, whom he hadn't seen for several days. He wondered where she was. When he came to the door, he reached absently for the knob, and what he felt startled him so much that he snatched his hand back as if he'd been stung. He felt again, carefully. There was a key in the lock. For a long moment, Dune stood as still as a statue. Then he took hold of the doorknob and turned it. Very slowly, he pushed on the door. It swung inward without a sound. He opened it only a few inches, just enough to peer around the edge. What he saw made him gasp. There was no road or passage or stairway behind the door. There was a brightly lit room whose size he could not guess at because it was so crowded with things. On all sides were crates and boxes, sacks and bundles and packages. Piles rose to the low ceiling and leaned against the walls, blocking all but a small space in the center. In that small space, a little living room had been set up. There was a greenish rug, and on the rug, an armchair and a table. On the table were dishes smeared with the remains of food, and in the armchair facing Dune was a great blob of a person whose head was flopped backward, so that all Dune could see of it was an upthrust chin. I wonder who that is in that chair. The blob stirred and muttered, and Dune, in the second before he stepped back and pulled the door closed, caught a glimpse of a fleshy ear, a slab of gray cheek, and a loose, purplish mouth. That day, Lena had more messages to carry than ever. There had been 5 blackouts in a row during the week. They were all fairly short. The longest was 4.5 minutes, Lena had heard, but there had been so many so close together. Everyone was nervous. People who might ordinarily walk to someone's house were sending messages instead. Often they didn't come out into the street, but beckoned to a messenger from their doorway. By 5 o'clock, Lena had carried 39 messages. Most of them were more or less the same. I'm not coming to the meeting tonight. Decided to stay home. I won't be into work tomorrow. Instead of meeting in Clothing Square, why don't you come to my house? The citizens of Ember were hunkering down, burrowing in. Sounds kind of like what we're having to do right now. Fewer people stood around talking in groups under the lights in the squares. Instead, they would pause briefly to murmur a few words to each other and then hasten onward. Lena was on her way home to Mrs. Murdo's. She and Poppy had moved in all of their things when she heard rapid footsteps. Startled, she turned and saw Dune racing toward her. At first, he was out of breath. He couldn't speak. What is it? What is it? Said Lena. The door, he panted. The door in 351. I opened it. Lena's heart leapt. You did? Dawn nodded. Is it the way out? Lena whispered fiercely. No, Dune said. He glanced behind him, clutching Lena's arm. He pulled her into a shadowy spot on the street. It doesn't lead out of Ember, he whispered. It leads to a big room. Lena's face fell. A room? What's in there? Everything. Food, clothes, boxes, cans, light bulbs, stacks of them. Everything. Piles and piles up to the ceiling. His eyes grew wide. And someone was in there, in the middle of it all, asleep. Who? A look of horror passed over Dune's face. The mayor, he said, conked out in a big armchair with an empty plate in front of him. The mayor? Lena whispered. Yes, the mayor has a secret treasure room in the pipeworks. They stared at each other, speechless. Then Dune suddenly stamped hard on the pavement. His face flushed red. That's the solution he keeps telling us about. It's a solution for him, not the rest of us. He gets everything he needs and we get the leftovers. He doesn't care about the city. All he cares about is his fat stomach. Lena felt dizzy as if she'd been hit on the head. What will we do? She couldn't think. She was so stunned. Tell everyone, said Dune. He was shaking with anger. Tell the whole city the mayor is robbing us. Wait. Lena put a hand on Dune's arm and concentrated for a minute. Come on, she said at last. Let's go sit in Harkin Square. I have something to tell you, too. Okay, I am going to stop right there for just a second. Wow, the mayor is in that room in the roped off tunnel hoarding supplies just for himself. So that's pretty shocking. But I know a lot of you made some good predictions about how you didn't trust the mayor and thought he was a pretty bad guy. So some of those predictions are coming true. I'm going to go ahead and share the thinking stem with you real quick. When the book said that the mayor when Dune said that the mayor doesn't care about the city, all he cares about is his fat stomach, I was thinking that Dune believes the mayor's actions are wrong. I agree with Dune. I think it is wrong to use a position of power to make life better for yourself at the expense of others. I don't think it's fair for the mayor to have all the supplies when the people of Ember are struggling. Okay. It's not very nice of the mayor. He's only thinking about himself, and the job of a mayor is to think about the people in the town that he represents, not himself. So that's pretty selfish of the mayor. I'm going to continue reading. At the north end of Harkin Square stood a circle of believers, clapping their hands and singing one of their songs. Lately, they seemed to be singing more loudly and cheerfully than ever. Their voices were shrill. Coming soon to save us, they wailed. Happy, happy day. Near the gathering hall steps, something unusual was happening. 20 or so people were pacing around and around, carrying big signs painted on old planks and on big banners made of sheets. The sign said, "What solutions, Mayor Cole? And we want answers." Every now and then, the demonstrators would yell those slogans out loud. Lena wondered if the mayor was paying any attention. Dune and Lena found an empty bench on the south side of Harkin Square and sat down. Now listen, said Lena. I am listening, said Dune, though his face was still red and the look on his face was stormy. I saw Lizzie coming out of the storerooms yesterday, Lena said. She told him about the cans and Lizzie's new friend Looper and what Looper was doing. Dune pounded his fist on his leg. That's 2 of them doing it then, he said. Wait, there's more. Remember how I thought there was something familiar about the man who came out the door? I remembered what. It was that way he walked, sort of dipping over sideways, and also that hair, that black hair, all unbrushed and sticking out. I've seen him twice. I don't know why I didn't remember who it was right away. Maybe because I've only seen him in the front. I took a message for him on my first day. Dune was jiggling with impatience. Well, who was it? Who was it? It was Looper, who works in the storerooms, Lizzie's boyfriend. And Dune, Lena leaned forward, it was a message to the mayor that he gave me, and it was this, delivery at 8. Dune's mouth dropped open. So that means he's taking things from the storeroom for the mayor, and he's giving some to Lizzie and selling some in his store. Oh, cried Dune. He slapped his hand against his head. Why didn't I get it before? There's a hatch in the ceiling near Tunnel 351. It must go right up into the storerooms. Looper comes through there. That's what we heard that day, remember? A sort of scraping. That would have been the hatch opening. Then a thud, his sack of stuff dropping through, and then a sound like someone jumping down and landing hard on the floor. And then walking slowly, because he was carrying a load, and walking quickly on the way out because he'd left it all for the mayor. Lena took a deep breath. Her heart was drumming and her hands were cold. We have to think what to do, she said. If this were an ordinary situation, the mayor would be the one to tell. But the mayor is the one committing the crime, said Dune. So then we should tell the guards, I guess, said Lena. They're next in authority to the mayor, though I don't like them much, she added, remembering how she'd been so roughly hustled down the stairs from the roof of the gathering hall, especially the chief guard. But you're right, Dune said. We should tell the guards. They'll go down into the pipeworks and see for themselves that we're telling the truth. Then they can arrest the mayor and have all that stuff put back in the storerooms, and then they can tell the city what's been going on. That's a much better idea, said Lena. Then you and I can go back to what's more important. What? Figuring out the instructions. Now that we know that door we found wasn't the right one, we have to find the right one. I don't know, said Dune. We might be all wrong about those instructions. They could just be about some old pipeworks tool closet. He made a sour face. Instructions for Eagerston? Who's Eagerston? Or Egressman? Or whoever it was. Why couldn't he have been just an especially stupid pipeworks guy who needed instructions to find his way around? He shook his head. I don't know. I think maybe those instructions are just hogwash. Hogwash? What's that? It means nonsense. I read it in a book in the library. But they can't be nonsense. Why would they have been kept in a box like that, with the strange lock? But Dune didn't want to think about the instructions right then. We'll figure it out tomorrow, he said. Right now, let's go find the guards. Wait, said Lena, catching hold of the sleeve of his jacket. I have one more thing to tell you. What? My grandmother died. Oh, Dune's face fell. That's so sad, he said. I'm sorry. His sympathy made tears spring to Lena's eyes. Dune looked startled for a moment, and then he took a step toward her and wrapped his arms around her. He gave her a squeeze so quick and tight that it made her cough, and then it made her laugh. She realized all at once that Dune, thin, dark-eyed Dune, with his troublesome temper and his terrible brown jacket and his good heart, was the person that she knew better than anyone now. He was her best friend. Thanks, she said. Well, she smiled at him, let's go and talk to the guard. They crossed the square and climbed the steps of the gathering hall. Sitting at the big reception desk outside the door of the mayor's office was the assistant guard, Barton Snowd, the same one Lena had encountered her first time here. Snowd looked bored. His elbows were on the desk and his chin was moving very slowly from side to side. Sir, said Dune, we need to speak with you. The guard looked up. Certainly, he said. Go right ahead. In private, said Lena. The guard looked puzzled. His small eyes darted back and forth. This is private, he said. No one here but me. But anyone could come along, said Dune. What we have to say is secret and very important. Very important, said Snood. Secret? His face brightened. Grunting, he raised himself up from his chair and motioned them into a narrow hallway off to the side of the main hall. What is it? He said. They told him. As they spoke, interrupting each other to make sure they got in all the details, the guard's eyebrows gradually lifted higher and higher over his eyes. You saw this room, he said. This is true. Are you sure? He was chewing faster now. You mean the mayor? You mean the mayor is... At that moment, a little way down the hall, a door opened. Through it came 3 more guards, including, Lena spotted him by his beard, the chief guard. They strode forward, talking to each other in low voices, and as they passed, the chief guard threw a quick glance at Lena. Does he recognize me? Lena wondered. She couldn't tell. Barton Snowd finished his sentence in a husky whisper. You mean the mayor is stealing? That's right, said Dune. We thought you should be informed, because who else can arrest the mayor? And once you've done that, the guards can put all the things he's stolen back where they came from. And then tell the city that a new mayor has to be found, added Lena. Barton Snowd leaned heavily against the wall and rubbed a hand over his chin. He seemed to be thinking. Something must be done, he said. This is shocking, shocking. He started back toward his desk, and Dune and Lena followed. I will make a note, he said, taking a pencil from the desk drawer. Lena watched as he wrote slowly on a scrap of paper. Mayor stealing, secret room. When he'd finished, he let out a satisfied breath. Very good, he said. Action will be taken. You may be sure. Some sort of action. Quite soon. Good, said Dune. Thank you, said Lena, and they turned to leave. The 3 guards were standing by the main door of the gathering hall as Dune and Lena went out. The chief guard moved aside to make way for them, and they went through the door and out into the wide front steps. Lena glanced over her shoulder. Before the door swung closed, she saw the chief guard striding toward the reception desk, where Barton Snowd was standing up, leaning forward, his eyes shining with important news. Okay, that ends chapter 12. So I want you, before I begin chapter 13, to think about what Dune and Lena just did and fill in the thinking stem. When the book said, I was thinking, I agree or disagree with Dune and Lena, I think it was right, wrong, too. So think about what they just did when they went to Barton Snood and told him about what the mayor was doing. Do you agree with that decision? Do you disagree? Was it right to tell? Was it wrong to tell? Think about that for a minute, and then once you've done that, you can come back and I will begin chapter 13. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to begin chapter 13, which is called Deciphering the Message. There is not going to be a thinking stem, so just enjoy as I read it, but there will be a comprehension quiz for this chapter, so make sure you're paying attention. Chapter 13, Deciphering the Message. Dune headed home, and Lena went to the opposite direction across Harkin Square. The little group of believers had gone, but the protesters with their signs continued to pace back and forth. A few of them were still shaking their fists in the air and yelling, but most of them tramped silently, looking tired and discouraged. Lena felt a bit that way too. Once Dune said he'd seen a door, she was sure that that door he'd found and the door in the instructions were the same. She had had such hopes for that door in the pipeworks, but hoping so hard had made her jump to conclusions. She'd gone a little too fast. She always went fast. Sometimes it was a good thing and sometimes not. Now Dune thought that the instructions were nothing important after all. She didn't want him to be right. She didn't believe he was, even now. But her thoughts felt like a mess of tangled yarn. She needed someone wise and sensible to help her sort things out. She headed for Gloom Street. Though it was nearly 6 o'clock, she found Clary still in her workroom at the far end of the greenhouse. It was a small, crowded room. Pots and trowels cluttered a high table at one end. Above the table were shelves full of bottles of seeds and boxes of string, wire, and various kinds of powders. Clary's desk was a rickety table littered with scraps of paper, all of them covered with notes in her neat, round handwriting. 2 rickety chairs went with the rickety table, one on each side. Lena sat down facing Clary. "I have to tell you some important things," she said, "and they're all secret." "All right," said Clary, "I can keep secrets." She was wearing a patched shirt that had been faded from blue to gray. Her short brown hair was tucked behind her ears, and a bit of leaf clung to it on the right-hand side. She folded her arms in front of her on the desk. She looked square and solid. The first thing is," Lena began, "that I found the instructions, but Poppy had chewed them up." "The instructions," said Clary. "I'm not familiar with them." Lena explained. She went on to explain everything, how she'd shown the instructions to Dune, what they had figured out, how they'd searched the pipeworks and found the door, and what he'd seen when he opened the door. Clary made an unhappy sound and shook her head. "This is very bad," she said, "and sad, too. I remember when the mayor was first starting out. He had always been foolish, but not always wicked. I'm sorry to know that the worst side of him has won out." Clary's dark brown eyes seemed to grow deeper and sadder. "There is so much darkness in Ember, Lena. It's not just outside, it's inside us, too. Everyone has some darkness inside. It's like a hungry creature. It wants and wants and wants with a terrible power. And the more you give it, the bigger and hungrier it gets." Lena knew. She had felt it in Looper's shop as she hovered over the colored pencils. For a moment she felt sorry for the mayor. His hunger had grown so big it could never be satisfied. His huge body couldn't contain it. It made him forget everything else. Clary let out a long breath, and a few of the scraps of paper on her desk fluttered. She ran her fingers through her hair, felt the bit of leaf, and plucked it out. Then she said, "About these instructions." "Oh yes," said Lena. "They might be important, or they might not be. I don't know any more." "I'd like to see them if you'd let me." "Of course you can see them, but you'll have to come home with me." "I'll come now if that's all right," said Clary. "There's plenty of time before lights go out." Lena led Clary up the stairs and into her new bedroom at Mrs. Murdo's. "Nice room," Clary said, looking around with interest. "And I see you have a sprout." "A what?" said Lena. "Your bean," said Clary, pointing at the little pot of dirt on the windowsill. Lena bent to see what Clary was talking about. Sure enough, the dirt was heaving up a little. She touched the pushed-up part, brushed away the dirt, and discovered a pale green loop. It looked like a neck, as if a creature in the bean were trying to escape but hadn't yet managed to pull its head out. Of course, she already knew that plants grew from seeds, but to have put that flat white bean in the dirt, to have almost forgotten about it, and now to see it forcing its way up into the air. "It's doing it," she said. "It's coming to life." Clary nodded, smiling. "Still amazes me every time I see it," she said. Lena brought out the instructions, and Clary sat down at the table to study them. She puzzled over the patchwork of scraps for a long time, tracing the lines with her finger, murmuring the parts of words. "What you figured out so far seems right to me," she said. "I think ip-ork must be pipeworks, and Iverb ink must be riverbank. So this bit must be down riverbank. Then there's a big space here. To edge. Edge of what, I wonder? And does it mean down riverbank, as in walk alongside the river? Yes, I think so, Lena said. Or does it mean go down the riverbank itself, down the bank toward the water? Maybe edge means edge of the water. It couldn't mean that. The bank goes straight down like a wall. You couldn't go down to the edge of the water. You'd fall in. Lena pictured the dark, swift water and shivered. This word, said Clary, putting a finger on the paper. Maybe it isn't edge. Maybe it's something else. It could be hedge or pledge. Those don't make much sense, but it could be ledge or wedge. Lena saw that Clary was no better at deciphering the puzzle than she was. She sighed and sat down on the edge of her bed. It's hopeless, she said. Clary straightened up quickly. Don't say that. This torn-up piece of paper is the most helpful thing I've ever seen. Do you know what the word is? She pointed to the word. Do you know what this word is? She pointed to the word at the top of the paper. Egress. Someone's name, isn't it? The title would be Instructions for Egresston, or maybe Egressman, or something like that. The person the instructions were for? I don't think so, said Clary. If you add an S to this word right here where the tear is in the paper, you get egress. Do you know what that means? No, said Lena. It means the way out. It means the exit. The title of this document is Instructions for Egress. When Clary left, there was still over an hour before lights out. Lena raced across the city to Greensgate Square. She glanced in the window of the small item shop where Dune's father was reaching for something on a shelf, and then she dashed up the stairs and knocked on the door of Dune's apartment. Right away, she heard quick steps, and Dune opened the door. I have something exciting to tell you, Lena said breathlessly. Come in, then. Lena went across the cluttered room to stand by a lamp. She pulled from her pocket a teeny piece of paper on which she had written egress. Look at this word, she said. It's from the title of the instructions. Someone's name? Said Dune. No, said Lena. It's meant to be egress with 2 S's. I showed the instructions to Clary, and she told me. It means the way out. The way out, cried Dune. Yes, the way out, the exit. It's instructions for the way out of Ember. So it is real, Dune said. It is. We have to figure out the rest, or as much of the rest as possible. Can you come now? He darted into his room, emerged with his jacket, and they ran out. All right, said Lena. They were on the floor of the blue-green room at Mrs. Murdo's. Let's take the first line. She moved her finger along it slowly. 1. EXP, big blank, RIV, blank, IP, blank, orc. We know that IP orc is pipeworks, she said. EXP could be expand or explore or expose. There's a big space between EXP and the rest, said Dune. There must be more words in there. But who knows what they are? Let's move on. Lena swept her straggly hair impatiently back from her face. Look at number 2. 2. Blank, STON, blank, marked with E by R, blank, DGE. Lena put her finger on stun. What could that be? Maybe piston, said Dune. That's part of machine like the generator, or maybe it's astonish, or it could be... I bet it's just plain stone, said Lena. There's a lot of stone in the pipeworks. Dune had to admit this was probably right, so then he said, it wouldn't be stone marked with E. He frowned at the next bit. This must be river's edge, stone marked with E by the river's edge. They looked at each other in delight. E is for egress, said Lena. E for exit. They bent over the document again. There's not much left of this next line, said Dune. 3. Blank ADDE, blank down, Iver, bank, blank, 2. Edge, APPR, blank, 8, blank, low. Just this part, which must say down river bank to edge something. Edge of water would make sense, but right after edge, there's APP. What would that be? Dune sat back on his heels and gazed up at the ceiling as if the answer might be there. Lena muttered, down river bank to edge. Edge? She thought of Clary's guesses about that line. Maybe it's ledge, she said. Down riverbank to ledge. There could be a ledge down near the water. Yes, that must be right. There's a stone marked with E, and down the riverbank, at that point, there's a ledge. I think we're getting it. Once again, they crouched over the page, their heads close together. Okay, Dune said. Line 4. A big blank, axe to the WATR, blank, find Dora, boo, blank, cur. I'm just going to show you guys because it's kind of hard for me to read that part, but that's line 4 right there. That's what they're trying to decipher. If you can see it. This is where it says door, Lena said. Somehow the door is by the ledge. Does that make sense? And there's that small steel pan. What could that mean? What would have a pan? What would a pan have to do with anything? But look. Lena tapped the paper urgently. Here it says K-E, and here it says E-Y. It's talking about a key. But what is at a door to? Said Dune, sitting back. Remember, we thought about this before. A door in the bank of the river would lead under the pipeworks. Lena pondered this. Maybe it leads to a long tunnel that goes way out of Ember and then gradually up and up until it comes out at the other city. What other city? Duke glanced up at the drawings tacked to the walls of Lena's rooms. Oh, he said, you mean that city. Well, it could be. Dune shrugged. I suppose so, or it could be another city exactly like this one. That was a gloomy thought. Both of them felt their spirits sink a little at that idea, so they turned back to the task of deciphering. Next line, said Lena. But Dune sat back on his heels again. He stared into the air, half smiling. I have an idea, he said. If we do find the way out, we'll need to announce it to everyone. Wouldn't it be splendid to do it during the singing? Stand up there in front of the whole city and say we found it? It would be, Lena said. But that's only 2 days away. Yes, we have to hurry. They were bending again over the glued-down fragments when Dune remembered that he should check the time. It was 9:15. He barely had time to get home. Come again tomorrow, said Lena, and while you're at work, look for the rock marked with E. That night, Dune had trouble sleeping. He couldn't find a comfortable position on his bed. It seemed to be made up of nothing but lamps and wrinkles, and it squeaked and groaned every time he moved. He flailed around so much that the noise woke his father, who came to his room and asked, What is it, son? Nightmares? No, said Dune, just can't sleep. Are you worrying? Frightened of anything? Dune wanted to say yes, Father. I'm worried because the mayor of our city is taking for himself the things that people need, and I'm afraid because any day our lights could go out forever. I'm worried and afraid a lot of the time, but I'm also excited because I think there is a way out and we might find it, and all those feelings are whirling around in my head, which makes it hard to sleep. He could have told his father everything. His father would have plunged in with great enthusiasm. He would have helped them decipher the instructions and expose the mayor's thievery. He would even have come down into the pipeworks and helped search for the rock marked with E. But Dune wanted to keep those things to himself for now. Tomorrow, the guards would announce that an alert young boy had uncovered the mayor's crime, and his father, hearing the announcements along with the rest of Ember, would turn to the person next to him and say, That's my son they're talking about. My son. So in answer to his father's questions, he simply said, No, Father, I'm all right. Well then, see if you can't lie still, said his father. Good night, son, he added, and closed the door. Dune smoothed out his covers and pulled them up to his chin. He closed his eyes, but still he couldn't sleep. So he tried a method that had often worked for him before. He would choose a place he knew well, the school for instance, and imagine himself walking through it, picturing it as he went in minute detail. Often his thoughts would wander, but he would always bring them back to the imaginary journey, and something about doing this would often make him sleepy. This night he decided to retrace his explorations of the pipeworks. He held his mind to the task for a long time, picturing with all the clarity he could muster everything he had seen in that underground realm. The long stairway, the tunnels, the door, the path along the river, the rocks along the path. He fell asleep drawing closer, a heaviness. He felt sleep drawing closer, a heaviness in his limbs. But just as he was about to give into it, he saw in his mind's eye the wrinkled rocks that bordered the river at the west end of the pipeworks. The rocks whose strange ridges and creases had reminded him of writing. His eyes flew open in the dark, his heart began to hammer, and he gave up on sleeping and lay in a state of terrible impatience for the rest of the night. Okay, that ends chapter 13. So I want you to go in and take the comprehension quizzes that I put on there, and then go and watch chapter 14 and 15 in the next video. See you later.